Islands are nature's laboratories, where isolation has led to the evolution of some of the most unusual and unique species on Earth, from tiny creatures with surprising adaptations to giant versions of animals found nowhere else. These species are truly one of a kind. Join me for today's video. We're going to explore 15 of the most fascinating and unusual animals found only on the Tasmanian devil in Australia. So the Tasmanian devil, it's a carnivorous species of marsupial that's native to the island of Tasmania in Australia. Originally, they were actually present across the whole of mainland Australia, but went extinct around 3,500 years ago. Known for their fierce temperament, high-pitched screams, and muscular body, it's a nocturnal scavenger that has such a strong jaw that it's able to crush bones and tear through meat. Locally, they became known as devils because of the aggressive sounds they make while feeding or fighting over food, but perhaps surprisingly, they're actually quite shy and reptiles. If there's a lack of food, though, they'll group together and take on something larger, with some evidence saying that they occasionally hunt small kangaroos. They've evolved to fill a role in their ecosystem that's extremely important. With such strong jaws that pound for pound give them one of the strongest bites in the mammalian kingdom, they're able to eat entire carcasses, including bones, and are efficient scavengers that help to recycle everything. They've also, of course, become famous around the world because of the cartoon character Taz. And while he's not exactly a perfect representation of the species, he's helped to highlight how varied animals can be in places like Tasmania and the importance of conservation efforts. There are concerns, though, about their falling population numbers, so in an initiative called the Save the Tasmanian Devil program, it sent individuals to zoos across the world, meaning you don't have to go all the way to Tasmania if you want to see one for real. Number 14. The Jamaican iguana. The Jamaican iguana is a critically endangered species to 5 feet or 1.5 meters long. They have tough bodies that are covered in rough, spiny scales, as well as a powerful tail and a row of dorsal spines that almost make them look prehistoric. The species' coloration varies from olive green to bluish gray, often with dark bands running down the body, which helps them blend into their forest surroundings, and their preferred diet is made up of mainly leaves, flowers, and fruits, although they will occasionally eat insects or smaller animals, particularly when they're young. The food they eat has made them an invaluable part of the island's ecosystem because many plant species rely on them to spread seeds, which is vital to the process of regeneration. They are the perfect example of how delicate a balance island ecosystems have, and by the late 1940s, the population had plummeted as a result of habitat loss, hunting, and the introduction of invasive species like mongoose, cats, and dogs, which preyed on adult iguanas and their eggs. By the 1950s, it was presumed extinct until its rediscovery in Hawaiian monk seal is one of the rarest marine mammals in the world, and the only place that you can find them is in the Hawaiian Islands. They get their name because of the folds of skin that look like a monk's cowl, and they're known as Ilioholo Ikauau in Hawaiian, which means the dog that runs through the rough water. The adult Hawaiian monk seals usually weigh between 375 and about 400 pounds, or about 170 to 205 kilos, with males normally being smaller than females. They grow about 7 feet or just over 2 meters long and have a sleek, streamlined body that makes them great swimmers. They can range in color from a silvery gray to a dark brown, often with lighter undersides, and they have large eyes that help them see in the ocean's depths. They are generalist feeders with a diverse diet which is mainly made up of fish, octopus, crustaceans, and eels, and when hunting they can dive to depths of over 500 feet or 150 meters, but will, if they can, feed closer to the shore. It's a species that's a huge part of the Hawaiian culture, but unfortunately as female seals return to these areas to give birth and nurse their pups. Conservationists monitor these sites and, when necessary, take action to keep humans at a safe distance to reduce disturbances. With rehabilitation facilities like the Marine Mammal Center's Keikaiola Hospital in Kona playing a vital role by treating injured or sick seals and reintroducing them into the wild. Number 12. The pygmy three-toed sloth in Panama. The incredible pygmy three-toed sloth is one of the rarest and most unique mammals on the planet, only native to Isla Escudo de Veraguas, which is a tiny island off the coast of Panama. Known like its relatives for its slow-moving nature, it's a species that's an example of insular dwarfism, which is an evolutionary phenomenon where species become smaller due to the limited resources that are available to them. The pygmy three-toed sloth is then the smallest of all sloth species, with adults weighing around 5 to 6 pounds or about 2 to 3 kilograms and measuring about 12 forest. Isla Escudo de Veraguas is a remote, isolated island that's been separated from mainland Panama for around 9,000 years. This isolation has created a unique ecosystem where species like the pygmy three-toed sloth have evolved independently. But unlike other sloths, which live in a range of forested areas, the pygmy sloth is found almost exclusively in red mangrove forests along the coast of the island. Their diet, too, is limited to leaves from mangrove trees, which are low in nutrients, which forces the sloths to conserve energy through their slow metabolism and minimal movement. And this is why they've evolved to be so much smaller. They have much lower nutritional requirements in the first place. The pygmy sloth is a great swimmer too and can use the water channels between the mangrove trees to move from one area to another, which is something that's rarely seen in other sloth species. Only a few hundred of them remain, and things are getting more difficult for them because of illegal logging and deforestation of mangrove trees. Conservation efforts are underway, although it's still really special because of its restricted habitat on Bioko Island, where it faces significant threats. As far as monkeys go, they are medium-sized, typically weighing between 20 to 26 pounds, or about 9 to 12 kilograms, and growing to about 20 to 24 inches, or about 50 to 60 centimeters long, not including their tails. Their coats are mainly dark gray to black in color, with the reddish cap covering the tops of their heads and a white collar around their necks, and they have a surprisingly expressive pinkish face, which is partly why they've become so popular. They're highly social and live in groups that can include as many as 30 of them. They communicate using a variety of sounds, facial expressions, and body language to establish social bonds and warn each other of potential threats. Vocal calls include high-pitched squeaks, barks, and grunts, which can echo through the forest and act as a signal to other group members. Within groups, they have clearly set hierarchies, with dominant males taking on the role of protector. With a diet made up of mainly fruits, nuts, and seeds, and occasional leaves, insects, however, are working to protect the island's rainforests and raise awareness about the importance of preserving its wildlife. And in recent years, their population is thought to already be showing signs of recovery. Number 10. Sri Lankan elephant. The Sri Lankan elephant. It's a subspecies of the Asian elephant and is only native to the island of Sri Lanka. It is one of the largest and darkest skinned of all Asian elephants, and they're known for being highly intelligent social creatures with complex behaviors and deep family connections. Males reach up to 11 feet or 3.4 meters tall and can weigh as much as 12,000 pounds or 5.4 tons, with females generally being a bit smaller. They have distinctive physical features like larger bodies, smaller ears than African elephants, and relatively smooth, dark gray skin with pink patches, which can often be seen on their faces, ears, and trunks. Only a small percentage of the male Sri Lankan elephants develop tusks, and this means there's less of a problem with poaching with this subspecies. With such huge food requirements, they have to cover vast distances to find food, and this often brings them close to human populations. The elephant population in Sri Lanka has seen a significant fall over the past century due to habitat loss and human activity. Today, only around 5,000 to 6,000 Sri Lankan elephants remain, with about 70% of them living outside protected areas. Sri Lanka does, though, have a deep cultural connection to elephants. In Buddhist tradition, the animal symbolizes strength, wisdom, and prosperity, and they're integral to local festivities, particularly in events like the Isala Perahera in Kandy, where elephants are dressed up with decorations and take part in the processions. This reverence of the creatures has helped with the setup of conservation efforts, with initiatives like habitat protection and the establishment of elephant corridors and the creation of protected areas and rehabilitating habitats. These, hopefully, will give the elephants a safer place to live and reduce contact between them and humans, which in the long run is better for both sides. Number 9-sized frog with adults measuring around 3 to 4 inches, or about 7.5 to 10 centimeters long. They have vibrant green bodies with occasional patches of yellow, and this coloration allows them to blend in perfectly. The unusual thing about them, though, is the webbing between their toes, which is much larger than other frogs. This webbing, when combined with long limbs and a slightly flattened body, act as a parachute, and this is what allows the frog to glide distances of up to 50 feet or 15 meters between trees, an adaptation that they use to escape predators, search for food, and find mates. Its hunting style is highly effective in the denseness of the rainforest, where it remains camouflaged as it waits for prey to pass by. This is an impressively adapted species, and its ability to glide means that they very rarely have to venture to the ground, and they can spend their entire lives in the trees. This, though, may well become their greatest vulnerability because of the logging and agricultural expansion that have already reduced most of their natural habitat. With a warming world, 100 pounds or about 250 kilograms, with some reaching nearly 4 feet or 1.2 meters long. Their shell or carapace is dome shape and dark gray to black in color, while their long legs are perfectly adapted for supporting their heavy weight on land. Their heads are small compared to their bodies, with a sharp beak-like mouth that's used for grazing, and they're known for their gentle and curious nature, often walking up to humans without fear, especially on islands where they're used to visitors. The Aldabra Atoll is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and the second largest coral atoll in the world. It's got a harsh and dry environment above water, though, and it's this that shaped the tortoise's behavior and physical adaptations. With limited freshwater resources on the island, the tortoises have developed a surprising tolerance for salt water, and combined with their slow metabolism and efficient water storage, means they can go for long periods without fresh water. Like other tortoises, they are herbivores and mainly eat grasses, leaves, and woody plants. They are essential to have generally a stable population here, and the protected status of their habitat means they aren't currently seen as being at risk. The atoll is monitored to prevent poaching, habitat destruction, and the introduction of invasive species. But just to be sure, some Aldabra giant tortoises have been taken to other islands in the Seychelles and around the world as a conservation measure. Moving on to number 7, the Lord Howe Island stick insect in Australia. The bizarre-looking Lord Howe Island stick insect is sometimes simply called the tree lobster because of its size and dark, lobster-like exoskeleton. This flightless insect, which is native only to the Lord Howe Island off the coast of Australia, is one of the rarest insects on the planet, so much so that it was once thought to be extinct until it was rediscovered in 2001 on a remote volcanic islet called Ball's Pyramid. They are some of the heaviest stick insects, reaching up to 6 inches or 15 centimeters long and weighing nearly an ounce, or a little more than 18, when a shipwreck introduced black rats to the island. The invasive predators quickly decimated the stick insects, and the flightless insects had no defensive measures. This led to their seeming disappearance, and within just a decade, the stick insect was believed to be extinct. But in 2001, a team of Australian scientists and rock climbers explored Ball's Pyramid, a remote volcanic outcrop near the island. And they found a small population of stick insects clinging to the steep, rocky landscape. Following this rediscovery, a captive breeding program was started to help revive the species. Scientists collected a small number of individuals and took them to Australia, where they began breeding them at the Melbourne Zoo. Efforts are now underway to prepare the island for the possible reintroduction of the stick insect, including the job of eradicating the black rat population from the island, so the environment can support these insects without threat from predators. Number 6. The blue-footed booby, Ecuador. The Galapagos Islands are one of the most biodiverse. Blue-footed boobies have a wingspan of around 5 feet, or 1.5 meters. Their feathers are mainly white, with dark brown or black accents on their wings and tails, and their heads are a pale gray color. This is in sharp contrast to their feet, which are almost an unnatural blue, which comes from carotenoid pigments that they absorb from their diet of fish. This means that the intensity of the blue is an indicator of the bird's health, with brighter feet showing a well-nourished and stronger individual. Their mating rituals are among the most fascinating of all in the animal kingdom. Males perform an elaborate dance to attract females, which includes lifting their feet high, spreading their wings, and offering small sticks or stones as gifts. The male's exaggerated lifting of his blue feet, almost like he's prancing, is a way of showcasing his fitness, as females are drawn to brighter blue feet. This dance is accompanied by whistling and honking sounds, and if a female is impressed, she'll then begin to mimic the male's dance, creating a synchronized Sometimes they'll even be seen hunting in groups, which can be an amazing display to see off the coast of the Galapagos Islands. Number 5. The New Caledonian Giant Gecko. So the New Caledonian giant gecko is also known as a lychee. It's the largest gecko species on the planet, and it can only be found natively in the forests of New Caledonia, which is an archipelago in the South Pacific. Amazingly, they can grow up to 14 inches or 36 centimeters long, including the tail, and some individuals weigh over 200 grams or 7 ounces, meaning that they're also the heaviest known gecko. They have flattened bodies that are covered in loose, velvety skin that ranges from pale green to brownish gray, often with a mottling or speckled pattern. This provides brilliant camouflage in its habitat, allowing it to blend into tree bark, moss, and lichen-covered surfaces. The species is therefore mainly arboreal, spending most of their lives in trees where they take shelter in hollow trunks, crevices, and under the loose bark of larger trees. On the island, the giant gecko can produce a range of sounds, from growls and clicks to barks. These are a form of communication, particularly during the territorial disputes or mating interactions, and it's the males that are the loudest, particularly when competing for mates, with their calls often sounding extremely loud for such a small creature, echoing through the forest at night. The gecko has a slow reproductive rate, which is normal with large geckos, and means that females usually lay only 2 eggs at a time, often in hidden locations where the eggs can develop safely. This, combined with their limited range and specialized habitat needs, makes them vulnerable to population pressures, particularly from habitat destruction and the introduction of new predators. The introduction of these non-native predators like rats and cats have had an effect on the gecko population, so conservation efforts are now underway to protect them. Work is also ongoing to protect the forests that remain on New Caledonia, so these geckos and a number of other species have the chance to continue living where they have done for thousands of years. Other lemurs by having a short vestigial tail, which is barely visible and has no known use. Its fur is thick and woolly, typically black and white, with patterns that vary depending on the region they live in. Now, locally, the indri is probably best known for its haunting call, with loud, almost siren-like vocalizations that can carry for over a mile. These sounds are mainly used for communication within and between groups, so families of indris will perform morning calls, often at dawn, to establish territory boundaries and maintain social connections. In some Malagasy cultures, the indri's calls are believed to carry spiritual significance, and there are countless legends that associate the animals with ancestral spirits. Their diet is made up almost entirely of leaves, with a preference for young, tender leaves. They are folivores, which means they spend a large amount of their day feeding to meet their needs. But they also will eat flowers, fruits, and bark when available, which adds a bit of variety to their diets. But the indri faces severe problem too. Organizations like the Madagascar Biodiversity Partnership and the Duke Lemur Center have been leading the way by studying indri populations, campaigning for protected areas, and working with local communities to develop sustainable land use practice. Ecotourism does also play a pretty pivotal role in indri conservation, as visitors traveling to the country to see these amazing animals contribute economically to local communities, which makes it more worthwhile for them to protect forests and wildlife. Number 3. The longed-beak echidna in Papua New Guinea. So mammals come in all different shapes and sizes on both land and in the water, but of all of them, probably the strangest and most unusual is the long-beaked echidna, which is found in the remote rainforests of Papua New Guinea, with some small populations also found on a few nearby Indonesian islands. They belong to a rare group of mammals called monotremes, which are the only mammals that lay eggs, and they're related to the short-beaked echidna and the platypus. Like other echidnas, which feed on ants and termites, the longed beaks specialize in earthworms, which they dig up from the soil using their snouts and powerful claws. The feeding strategy is a clever adaptation to the environment where other food sources are hard to come by. They dig into the ground with sharp, curved claws to uncover its prey, and has a tongue that's coated with sticky mucus, which allows it to capture worms and insects. Like all monotremes, these echidnas lay eggs, and during each cycle, the female lays a single leathery egg, which she carries in a temporary pouch that forms on her belly. After about 10 days, the egg hatches, and a tiny jelly bean-sized puggle emerges. The mother continues to carry the puggle in her pouch for several months until it begins to grow spines, at which point she places it in a burrow and occasionally returns to nurse it until it's mature enough to survive on its own. The species is classified as critically endangered, with its population in decline because of a number of factors. Habitat destruction from logging, mining, and agricultural expansion is the biggest threat, and the research projects are also underway to better understand the species' behavior, diet, and reproductive habits, which could then help with future conservation strategies. Number 2. The Pemba flying fox. The Pemba flying fox. It's a species of fruit bat that's only found natively on Pemba Island, which is off the coast of Tanzania in East Africa. As one of the largest bats in the world, with a wingspan reaching of more than 5 feet or 1.6 meters, the Pemba flying fox is a hugely important species within its ecosystem. Their bodies can grow to a length of around 10 to 12 inches or about 25 to 30 centimeters, and they'll typically weigh just over a pound or half a kilo. Its fur is a deep chestnut brown color, often with golden or reddish fringes around the neck and shoulders, and they have huge eyes that help them with their diet of fruit, as they give them excellent night vision. Unlike most other smaller bat species, though, the Pemba flying fox doesn't use echolocation and instead uses its sense of sight and smell to locate food. As a fruit, usually reduce the flying fox's roosting and feeding areas. For some communities, the bats are hunted for food as well, and their meat is sold in local markets. This has resulted in the population of the flying fox to fall to dangerously low levels, with fewer than 1,000 individuals remaining by the early 1990s. Since the 1990s, the species has been protected by Tanzanian law, and awareness campaigns have educated local communities. Conservation organizations, in partnership with local authorities, have worked to protect roosting sites and prevent hunting them, with community-based efforts proving to be particularly effective. As proof of how initiatives like these can work, the population of the Pemba flying fox has now grown, with recent estimates suggesting there are as many as 20,000 individuals. To ensure the long-term survival of the species, conservationists are focusing on sustainable land use practices and even helping develop alternative livelihoods for local farmers to reduce their dependence on hunting. Number 1. The Marquesan king, with a bright white underbelly and a distinctive white crown surrounded by dark blue feathers on their heads. Females have duller coloration with a mix of greenish-blue hues, and both have stout bills which have adapted for catching and eating their prey, including insects, small reptiles, and occasionally crabs or fish. Their habitat is restricted to just a few islands in the Marquesas group, particularly the island of Tahuata, where they live in dry forests and brush areas. These islands, like many isolated archipelagos, have fragile ecosystems. So deforestation for agriculture, logging, and urban development has transformed a lot of the native forest into agricultural land, reducing the natural nesting sites for these birds. Their diet is mainly insectivorous, feeding on a diet of large insects such as beetles, grasshoppers, and caterpillars, though occasionally it hunts small lizards and other invertebrates. Its hunting style is like other kingfishers, involving a sit-and-wait approach. The bird perches on a branch, scanning the ground below, and then dives down to capture prey. Invasive predators have greatly impacted their population. Conservation efforts to protect the kingfisher are now a priority for environmental organizations and local authorities. The species is listed as critically endangered on the IUCN Red List, and initiatives are focused on habitat preservation and the control of invasive species. Protecting the remaining native forests on Tahuata and other islands is essential for the kingfisher's survival, and habitat restoration projects are underway to reforest areas with native plants, creating a more sustainable environment for the kingfishers and other native species. Thanks for hanging with me, everybody. I'll see you next time. Thank you to our channel members.